Time to talk Buckeyes. 5 minutes late. My fault, everybody. I had no internet for 3 hours. I'm going to blame that, even though I got it back with about 25 minutes to spare. But, you got to hustle around and get things together. So, Ohio State Live, that's the important thing. We got our three best right here for our 106th edition. Kevin Noon, Buckeye Grove up at the top there. Steve Hellwagon, senior Big Ten writer, Bucknuts 247 Sports. And Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop. Boys, how we doing today?
Doing good.
Doing well.
Good to see everybody here. Got some great topics coming up here as we make our way through, I guess, this next weekend. Memorial Day weekend will officially be summer for a lot of people. June 21st, I know, is what the calendar tells us. Memorial Day weekend kind of kicks it off for many, as we're going to go through offensive line, defensive line depth chart that Steve has presented there on 247 Sports on Bucknuts. And Kevin's got an interesting little article out on first game performances by Ohio State quarterbacks throughout history. And got that betting line out for a particular game in November we can discuss as well. Steve, let's kick this off with your offensive line, and we'll let everybody know that last week's show, we ran down quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers, also the tight end position. So check that out right here as well. All right, Steve, I'm going to let you take it away with the offensive line.
Well, I think you got to be excited, first of all, to have the two tackles, Thayer Munford and Nicholas Petit-Ferrer back. You have Harry Miller, who also played a guard position last year. He figures to be back as well. And then it's kind of wide open whether who's going to play center and who's going to play the other guard position. It's possible Harry Miller could play the center position as well. They lost Josh Myers and Wyatt Davis. Myers was the center, and Wyatt Davis was the right guard. Lost those two early to the NFL draft. And now I think it's pretty obvious that Munford and Petit-Ferrer are going to be the starters at the tackle positions. But when you're looking at it, you've got 4 or 5 guys for those other 3 spots. When you talk about Harry Miller, Luke Whippler, who is almost certainly a center, Matthew Jones, who could play center or guard, and then Paris Johnson could play right guard as well. So that's 4 guys for 3 spots basically there. DeJuan Jones is kind of, in my mind, the utility tackle. Could be the first guy in at left tackle or right tackle. We saw him repping at both those positions this spring. So I've given you, I think, 7 names there that I think that Greg Studrawa, the offensive line coach, is pretty happy with. And he also talked up Josh Fryer, who was repping Summit Guard this spring because Harry Miller was out with an injury. So I think what they need to do, or what it seems like they might do, is get into the fall camp in August and figure out maybe who the center is going to be between Harry Miller, Luke Whippler, and Matthew Jones, and then maybe go from there and fill in the 2 guard spots. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that Harry Miller, after starting last year, could be out of a job this coming fall, and by no undoing of his own, just some other guys that come back and are in much better shape and didn't miss a lot of time in the off season because of injury. So hard to say what's going to happen, but that kind of sets the stage for it. And I'll hang up and listen to what the other experts on this call might think about those 5 offensive line spots.
Yeah, as I kind of look at it, I don't really disagree with a lot of what Steve said there. I think that when it comes down to, who the 2s are going to be, that's really going to be the major question. Certainly inside when you're dealing with Matt Jones versus Harry Miller, Harry Miller, you don't normally lose your spot due to injury, but, we certainly saw a lot of Matt Jones during high-pressure, high-leverage situations. So it'll be interesting there with Luke Whippler kind of being the wild card in that position. But, it's so important with your line play. It all starts up front for certain. Having, 2 returning starters with MPF and with Thayer Munford at your tackles, that really is going to be a big plus for Ohio State. Paris Johnson is just so good. You have to find a way to get your best 5 out there. he's a tackle of the future, but if you have him in at guard, I mean, that's, that is a very strong situation for you. So, I think we're going to see some things that are going to go through the August camp or whatnot. But, I think we kind of have an idea, it's maybe a group of 6.5 guys to fill the 5 in terms of where we think things may stand right now. But, stranger things have happened. If we rewind several years ago, I don't know if I would have said that I thought that Michael Jordan was going to start as a true freshman. So you never truly know for sure. But I think we've got a pretty good handle on this one, more or less.
Yeah, I would agree. There's only certain guys that are going to be in that top 5, and that's what Stodrawa said. He wants to find his top 5. And when I asked him this spring if Harry Miller would be there, he seemed adamant that Harry Miller would. So if we put Harry Miller, if we keep him at the left guard, then it's Matt Jones or Luke Whippler at center, or do they want to move Harry Miller to center? I think right guard is set with Paris Johnson. They're just going to put him there and let him go. And so then it comes down to 3 guys for that left guard and that center spot. It sure sounds like Stud believes Harry Miller will be at one of those 2 spots. So then it's, is Luke Whippler a better center than Harry Miller and Matt Jones, or is Matt Jones a better guard than Harry Miller? And so there's some interesting pieces and parts to have to fit in around there to find those 5 best and where they shake out. But then the depth, I think, is also what sets this offensive line apart, because whoever doesn't win, whoever that 6th guy is going to be really good. And DeJuan Jones has started and played well at tackle. As Steve said, he's your utility tackle. And Josh Fryer could start at most places in the Big Ten, and he played well at tackle in practice last year, moved to guard this year, and they've got guys. Past coaches have said they want 8. You got your starting 5, and then you got a backup center, backup guard, and backup tackle. And they sure seem to have that. So they're in good footing. And then they have even more depth behind that. So I don't think we've ever seen it this deep. And these tackles, Thayer Munford and Nick Petit-Frere, I've said before that might be the best pair of tackles at Ohio State since Orlando Pace and Corey Stringer. And I've gone through every single pair of tackles before, and these guys definitely have an argument.
I'll say that I agree that 1 through 8, it's as good as I can recall in recent memory at the tackle position. I think you got to be excited about that you built the depth and you've got talent. DeJuan Jones, he'd be starting and starring just about any other place in the country, and Paris Johnson probably the same as well. And so you got some guys who are eager and anxious to get in there and get going. And I'm not discounting some of the other guys that are listed here, like Enoch Vamahi. He's also kind of in the 2 deep as well. And I think there was one more name I did not want to disavow here that might be a potential. Grant Toutant, Ryan Jacoby. Those guys also seem to be kind of in the mix and waiting. Jacob James is another guy, and Ben Crispin. So you've got a lot of young talent, a lot of depth. They're adding a tackle this summer, Donovan Jackson, a big-time prospect out of Texas, I believe, coming in this summer. And as Kevin alluded to Michael Jordan a little bit ago, he was a true freshman that came in and played, although they had a need back then because they'd lost some guys to the NFL, that they needed somebody to come in and play right away. I don't know that that's necessarily the case right now on the defensive line, so maybe it wouldn't look so obvious that Donovan Jackson would get to play right away. But you really got to like it, 1 through 8, 1 through 10, and I think that, again, it's got the makings of being one of the better offensive lines Ohio State's had in recent memory.
Steve, your buddy that's 247 Sports, a Big Game Boomer, has Thayer Munford rated as the 2nd best offensive tackle in the country behind Evan Neal of Alabama.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring that up. I think Pro Football Focus did a nice survey here this past week of the top 10 college players at every position. There were 6 Ohio State players mentioned in that survey, including both Thayer Munford and Nicholas Petit-Frere as a tackle position. I think Munford was number 1, and Petit-Frere was somewhere around 7 or 8. And I wonder about Munford if he's just getting it because of longevity. He started over 40 games, I believe now, has started in games in parts of 4 different seasons. So, obviously getting this chance as a super senior to come back and play another year, he's going to set some records for games played and games started that'll probably be hard for anybody to beat at Ohio State, because they're not going to get to play 4.5 or 5 years like he's getting to play. But I think that that was a major stroke. Coming back on that list, and this is something we can touch on later, 11 different position groups and 10 guys at each group. That's presumably the top 110 players in college football, give or take. I mean, the number 10 wide receiver, just as an example, could actually be the number 150 player if you set them out. But you get the gist of what I'm saying. 110 of the top players in college football, Michigan had exactly one. Aiden Hutchinson, number 4, I think, at defensive end. I think he was the only guy mentioned in the survey, and there's a reason why Michigan is where it is right now, and that's an indicator right there.
I'll say Daxton Hill got robbed. They should have had at least two guys on that list. But no more.
If you say so, Tony, you follow him every week. I don't have any idea.
Yeah, Dax Hill's really good. The problem is that he just doesn't have a lot of reinforcements around him. So, he's going from his safety position. He's going to have a lot of action, because I don't really know what they're going to have at the corner position to support any of it. So, I agree with Tony. Not to be some sort of Michigan sympathizer here, but he probably should have made the list.
Dax Hill is Jon Snow when he's taking on Ramsey Bolton or whatever, and it's just him against like an army of people coming at him, all on their horses, and he's just there with one sword, and then he's about to get overwhelmed. That's Dax Hill in that Michigan secondary, but he's an outstanding player. I guess it's hard to look good in that Michigan defense or to get too many accolades. I think Aiden Hutchinson is fine. I thought Kwity Paye was fine, but there's not a lot of guys there. There's not a lot of there at Michigan right now.
Big Game Boomers got Harry Miller at 13 and got Paris Johnson at 38 as well.
I hadn't seen that.
We're going to be looking at all sorts of rankings here in the next month or two.
Yeah, I'll take his word for what it is.
All right, good stuff. I will take, of course, comments and questions in the live chat. I'm sure there are many, as I've been scrambling with the graphics and so forth concerning the offensive line, and we will get back to those. Defensive line, let's switch spots and go, Steve, to your depth chart forecast on the defensive line.
Yeah, we'll break it up into 2 different groups, the defensive ends and the defensive tackles. And I think you lose Jonathan Cooper, who was a starter at defensive end, along with Tyreek Smith. And starter is kind of a misnomer because the guys generally played about the same number of snaps, the key guys, the 4 or 5 key guys there at defensive end. Larry Johnson did a good job of rotating. But in terms of the game started, it was Jonathan Cooper and Tyreek Smith who seemingly started more of the games than anybody else. Then you have Zach Harrison, the junior, Tyreek Smith. He's back. I've got him down as a senior, but is he actually a junior? Am I off on that?
He's a senior.
I don't know. He's a senior.
Tyreek Smith, yeah.
Okay. Then my second team, I had Tyler Friday as a senior and Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who is a junior, and I had him kind of bracketed with Jack Sawyer, who's a freshman. And then the third team, I had 3 names, Cormonte Hamilton, who's a sophomore and a convert from tight end, Darian Henry Young, who's a redshirt freshman, and Jacoby Cowan, who's also a redshirt freshman. So that kind of covered all of the defensive ends. I don't think they have anybody else coming in this summer. I think that's it. Um, there's 3 defensive linemen coming in. Yeah, and the one that's not in yet is Mike Hill. Does that sound right? And they all
Streetsboro. Yeah.
Yeah, Mike Hall, and they also have Tyleek Williams, and he's a tackle. So, yeah, that's the extent of it. It's not a real deep group. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 names plus a walk-on. Aaron Cox, I think, might be repping there as well. So, 8 names at defensive end for 2 spots. So I guess that's 4 deep at each spot. But we need to see production, and I don't think the names really matter here. I think it's production, and I think people have hoped and said a lot of great things about Zach Harrison and Tyreek Smith, and now it's time for those guys to deliver. I like Jack Sawyer. I think he's got the potential to come in and maybe be a Joey Bosa who gets to start, start may not be the right word with those upperclassmen ahead of him, but play a lot as a true freshman. And yet, as I kind of went back over and watched the spring game, I'm watching him try to go up against Thayer Munford, and Thayer Munford is just swallowing him whole. He didn't do much damage against the starting tackles. It was, later on in that scrimmage when he was getting by, some of those other guys and touch sacking the quarterback. So for his three sacks without wrapping anybody up. So, how that converts to real life football is probably like a buck 47 maybe or something in real money. But I don't know. I guess we'll see how he converts it and how he looks out there against the real guys, because everybody's going to have guys like Munford and Petit Ferrer, at least veterans, big guys, and is he going to get swallowed up by those guys when they get into the season for real? But I don't know. That's my take on that position. I got Harrison and Smith as my starters. Then the veterans, Friday and Jean-Baptiste behind them, with Jack Sawyer probably ahead of the rest of those guys who were already on the team last year with Hamilton, Henry Young, and Cowan.
Yeah, I'm with you on Zach Harrison and Tyreek Smith as the top 2 guys. And while Tyler Friday and Javonte Jean-Baptiste are both 4th-year guys and they've been around, the production hasn't been there. So this is a spot where Jack Sawyer could move in there and be the number 3 guy and get in that rotation, or he could just be one of the 5, and they would all just rotate. And it's important for Ohio State that Tyler Friday and Javonte Jean-Baptiste get into the backfield more. It's probably even more important that Tyreek Smith and Zach Harrison do it. Because Tyreek Smith has maybe 3 or 4 sacks in his career, and Zach Harrison had 3.5 as a freshman, and maybe 3 last year or something like that. So they need more production. They have tons of hype. 5-star Zach Harrison, almost a 5-star Tyreek Smith, and everybody likes them, and they're all talented, and they look like this guy and they look like that guy. But if they're not getting to the quarterback, they're not as good as they should be. But I think they'll be fine. If you start doubting Larry Johnson, do it at your own peril. And then I think with the defensive tackles, with Haskell Garrett and Teron Vincent, it starts there. And whether they're playing next to each other or they're rotating with each other, I think you've got an opportunity to make the interior a strength again like it was last year. But losing Tommy Togiai is going to be tough to get through at tackle. But Kevin, I think the ends will be fine, and maybe they get more out of Jack Sawyer than they've gotten out of a freshman since, maybe Nick Bosa.
Yeah, there are positions where I care about talking about a depth chart, and there are positions that I don't really care as much about talking about the depth chart and Larry Johnson's philosophy of rolling guys in and out. I think that there's, especially at end, if you can sit there and say 6, and one guy that hasn't committed anywhere yet that, I think Ohio State fans certainly would like to see in that rotation is JT Tuimoloau, if I got that name right. And, he's still supposed to be taking some June visits and, could maybe be on a campus by July at that point. As we kind of have talked about in a previous show, I think it's a big asking for him to jump right in there and say, are you going to be getting quote-unquote second-team reps, which honestly, we don't see guys getting much more than 40 in Larry's system. Some guys get up to 40, 41. Some guys are in the low 20s or whatnot. But, I think especially at end, if we're talking about Harrison and we're talking about Tyreek Smith and Friday and JJB and Jack Sawyer, and whether or not that sixth guy is JTT or maybe a younger guy steps in, maybe, Darion Henry Young has the light bulb go off or Noah Potter, you just don't know. And then, moving inside to tackle, having Haskell Garrett come back is a huge addition for them. Obviously, you have him, Antoine Jackson, Teron Vincent, Jerron Cage, and then, you had Jaden McKenzie, who really kind of played sparingly last year, and then you have Michael Hall coming in. So, they certainly have some guys there. They're certainly not as deep as what we were talking about on the offensive line, where the Ohio State second-team O-line might be the second-best O-line in the Big Ten. I don't know if Ohio State has that depth there, but, as Tony said, wager against Larry Johnson at your own peril.
I will throw out and I would agree with Kevin's sentiment that the starter tag is kind of an antiquated notion of looking at this, although Haskell Garrett was the starter and played a lot last year. Tommy Togiai was the other starter at defensive tackle. He left early for the NFL. I think he was a fourth-round NFL draft pick, perhaps. Teron Vincent, and Garrett is a super senior, taking advantage of that extra year. What a great rule that was. And Ohio State getting some key contributors with their Munford at tackle and offensive tackle and Haskell Garrett defensive tackle. Teron Vincent is the other guy who I think most people look as the next guy up at defensive tackle, junior. Then you got Jerron Cage, who's a senior, Antoine Jackson, who's a super senior. I have them as the backups. And then the third team, I had Ty Hamilton, a sophomore, Noah Potter, a sophomore, who's kind of jockeyed between end and tackle. Tyleik Williams, a true freshman, got in there this spring. We heard a lot of great things about him. Jaden McKenzie, I'm not sure what's going on with him. I think he may have missed some time this spring due to injury. He's a sophomore. And then Mike Hall, a freshman from up in the Cleveland area. He is coming in this year as well. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys for 2 spots there. So again, you've got plenty of depth. And I was remiss in not mentioning JT Tuimoloau with the defensive ends and the potential for him to crash the 2 deep as well as the nation's number 3 overall prospect. I think Ohio State fans are hoping that he'll come to campus this June and fall in love with everything he sees and say, I want to wear the scarlet and gray. That would be huge. But, of course, Alabama and Oregon are going to make a real push on him as well. I'll throw it out there for Tony if he's got anything else on the defensive tackles that he likes. I know Kevin touched on it a little bit.
Yeah, I think I really like both Mike Hall and Tyleik Williams, and I think there's enough depth that those 2 guys can redshirt and just learn a bit. But I know from talking to people in the area about Mike Hall, he's a really good athlete, explosive basketball-type player at 280, 290 pounds. And Tyleik Williams came in around 330, might have to drop a little bit of weight, but also a quick guy. I think maybe get them 4 games in this year, and then next year maybe set them loose, because I don't know that there's enough room for them this year, especially when you're talking about you're probably going to see a bit of the rushman package where you've got defensive ends playing inside. So there's not going to be a lot of snaps for defensive tackles throughout the season.
Steve, I would say that you can't win in that situation. If you include JTT, then people are going to say that you jumped the gun. And if you don't include him, as I know that you've heard, well, you need to include him. Where's he going to factor in?
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. And I think, everyone's clamoring to find out. And, it'll happen in due time wherever he ends up. And they're going to play the football season at Ohio State, Alabama, and Oregon. And one of them will have him and the other 2 won't. And that's just the way the cookie's going to crumble. It seems like the other two programs are going to press ahead. They're not going to surrender their position in Cuba just because they didn't land JT Tuimoloau. So it be interesting to see what happens. But we'll take it with a grain of salt, one way or the other. Take it in stride and move on to the next stop.
You three have been in this game for a long, long time. I'm going to start with Kevin because of his investment in the recruiting game, because this is how it seems to me like it's going to play out. June 1st, the floodgates open. You see all these schools saying we're having all these special weekends, barbecues, and all sorts of things going on. Basically, the first 2 to 3 weekends of June. And then I got to think most of these top guys either just want that taste of the one school that they're boom, or most of them are more in the 2 to 3, 4 range where they're like, I got to get to X, Y, and Z. And then probably around the end of June into mid-July, do you expect just, wow, we're going to get slapped in the face with all sorts of commitments all over the place?
I don't think it's only going to be commitments. I think we're going to see nationally, before Ohio State fans jump off a ledge, nationally, we're going to see a good amount of decommitments, because I think a lot of kids out there nationally put in their placeholder because we had no guarantees that this was going to open in June, July, August, September, whenever. So I think you're going to have kids who are going to go out, take visits, look around, see what's going on. We recently did a podcast over for Buckeye Grove on the BIA podcast, and I asked our recruiting guy, what would you put the over-under on for July or for June commitments? And he initially said 2.5, and then shortly after we got off the air, he's like, I probably should have said 4 or whatever. I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of commitments happening, especially in 2022. Ohio State really hasn't started pressing for 23 yet. That could maybe start. There are a couple of in-state guys that I think that once they get on campus, because we're talking about young guys in that instance that really have never come to campus in a recruiting capacity. So I think that's all going to move quickly. But I guess getting back to the genesis of this with JTT, he's going to take his visits back to back to back to back. He's going to have to, because at some point he's going to have to show up on a campus, move into a dorm, all of that good stuff or whatnot. But yeah, buckle up. We're going to be talking a lot of recruiting throughout this industry, starting here in 12 days or whatnot. First visit weekend is June 2nd. It's going to be on, as the kids say.
Good stuff. Talking Buckeyes football here each and every week. Tony, did you have something?
No, I was just looking at the list of visitors, and you've got about 11 commitments visiting June 4th, and then another 11 or 12 uncommitted guys who are 4-stars and 5-star guys visiting as well officially. And it wouldn't be a shock to see a couple of those guys maybe pop. And then you've got some 2023 guys who are kind of penciled into Ohio State, and I wonder if we might start getting that ball rolling. I know, as Kevin said, they're not pushing for it, but guys like to be the first and the second in the class and try to get a little bit early. And there's certainly some guys there that Ohio State would take right now if they wanted to come in like Sonny Styles or Luke Montgomery. And so maybe that'll be there as well. It's just going to be a crazy time, and that's just the first week of June.
All right. Before we move on to our next topic, we're going to catch a question here from David Greenshield. Any news about and for most fans, he's going to be referred to as the linebacker from USC. Any recent update on anything there or speculation? It's only going to be speculation because we're either going to hear something that's concrete or not. And until then, it's going to be what it is, which is pretty much speculative.
Yeah, you're not dealing with a 16 or 17-year-old kid who's in love with this whole recruiting process and broadcasting it in front of the world. You're dealing with somebody who was a class of 18 guy. You're not going to see a lot of forward movement out there. I mean, maybe some dates if he decides to go look around could come out, but I think this is just going to be it's going to happen or it's not going to happen type of situation. All indications I have, things still seem to be moving on a forward track. But again, when it comes to portal recruitments per se, you're not going to see as much on your top end guys. I mean, maybe your guys going from lower 1A to lower 1A didn't get a lot of notoriety the first time around. Maybe they're going to put more stuff out there, but not really the way I see this one going down, unless one of the other guys disagrees with me, which certainly could be the case. But I'm not hearing a ton in terms of a play-by-play on this one.
I think as long as there's no, it's definitely Texas, then Ohio State is still very much in this, and the fact that there are some brakes put on this thing on his way to Texas seemingly tells me that Ohio State is still very heavily involved. But I know we've talked about it in the past. Like, well, what is he? Is he a utility guy that can come in and play 25 snaps? And if so, do you need that? But they are inexperienced, if not young. They've got 3 senior linebackers, but those guys have all of 0 starts combined, to their credit. So maybe there's a benefit to having an old guy in there. But I still think it's a touchy situation when you've got guys who've been waiting, and if they see this as their job being given away to somebody who's never stepped foot on, hasn't stepped foot recently on the Ohio State campus, it can create some issues. But they're not. I just keep going back to what Ryan Day always says. We're not going to bring in guys who aren't the right fit, and so it's got to be a fit in terms of off the field, on the field, and in the weight room and in the locker room as well.
Yeah, Cheryl brought up that question, will Coach Day hit the portal? And we've heard Coach Day talk about it. It's got to be a culture fit. It's got to be a position fit. It's got to be somebody at a position of need and somebody they feel can help them. And obviously they wanted Henry Tua'au, who went from Tennessee to Alabama and flirted with Ohio State. So they perceive a need. They coached the linebackers in the spring. So they know what they have and they know what they need to get this defense back on the proper straight and narrow here after what was a terrible season, I think, in most people's eyes last year, giving up 26 or 27 points a game on average, whatever the exact number was. But and I know some of that skewed by the 50 burger that Alabama put on them. But at any rate, I'm interested to see how deep Coach Day does go into the portal. They've had some success with it, obviously, with Trey Sermon and Antoine Jackson to a degree, and Jonah Jackson, the offensive lineman, a couple of years ago as well. So in small dollops and little drips and drabs, maybe 1 or 2 guys a year, I think you might see them do it. But I don't ever think you're going to see them do a 5-man foray into the portal to plug holes that have sprung leaks all across the team. I don't think you're going to see that.
No,
Michigan State.
Yeah, like a Michigan State.
Yeah, no, I mean, let's remember, too, linebacker was like really the shining beacon of the defense last year, and they're all gone. But I think that, and I'll be quick on this, if you brought in Naote Ote, or if you bring in Toto, sorry, I'm getting my Samoan names mixed up. If you bring in Toto, I think he's somebody you bring in to put on the field the whole darn time, and you just run with it. I think with Naote Ote, the USC guy, he's somebody who's kind of a 4th linebacker. You're able to sit there, okay, this is our bullet configuration. This is our 4-3 configuration. And I know nobody really wants to see that 4-4 configuration, but they did run some 4-4. I think he's somebody who's kind of Justin Hilliard or whatever. I don't know what the situation is necessarily at Texas. I don't know what Texas would be, quote unquote, promising him in terms of playing time, but you're dealing with somebody who's had a bit of an injury-riddled career or whatnot. I think that the best-case scenario is to bring somebody in who adds leadership to the room, who's able to maybe give you 35 snaps a game on the defensive side of the ball. And there are going to be certain situations where if you're playing a team that is a big downhill running type of team, he's going to see more. If you're dealing with a team that is all about playing to the edges and dinks and dunks and everything else, he might not see much or any playing time in those types of games. So it's all part of the dance, all part of the, dare I use this term, the massage that you have to do with all of this. I tried not to use that word. I came too far down the plank, and I'm like, I'm done. I've got to use it.
Well, as long as the 2021 season that they get into, and then they, get into the deep in the season with Michigan and whoever they might play for their 5th consecutive Big Ten championship game victory, and then whoever they might play in the college football playoff national semifinals this year. And I think the semifinals are, goodness, I'm trying to think where they are.
I don't remember.
I'm drawing a blank. Oh, well. I think maybe Phoenix and Atlanta, maybe. And then the championship games in Indianapolis. Kevin, Tony, as long as they get, that deep into the season and everything at the end, you get the happiest of endings. I mean, what else could you hope for?
Kevin said the linebacker's name with such What are you laughing at, Kevin?
It's a family show. It's a family show. It was just a lot of setup for a punchline there.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, Kevin, you said that linebacker name with such conviction, it almost planted it in my brain. Teo. I think I got it that time, if that was correct.
Ote. I couldn't find my phonetic guide, but I was sitting here going, oh my God, I made such a big deal last week. I'm going to get put on the spot. So let me make sure I get that right.
EA.
I was impressed. Doesn't take much, but I was impressed. All right. We'll consider this halftime, so we'll stop down and let people know where they can find these three. They are three of the best, so lock it in. Got Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove on Rivals. Kevin, where can people find you? What you got going?
I'm on Twitter at Kevin_Noon. I'm at BuckeyeGrove.com or OhioStateRivals.com. We just recently finished up a feature on how first-time starters at quarterback fare in their first games as starters, and maybe we will get an opportunity to talk about that here in a second. I will go all the way back to Troy Smith, and I've got another feature starting tomorrow where I look at dynamic duos, 1-2 punches at wide receiver in Ohio State history. I've actually been kind of jotting some notes down while I've been on the show.
1-2 punches. Interesting. I'm going to do that tonight and get that done before you. So that's what I'm doing, Mark.
Nice.
I'm just at bucknuts.com, treading water.
Steven.
That's it.
Treading water. Oh,
treading
come on.
Water. Okay, we're kicking ass. What can I say?
Yes. Your treading water is kicking ass for the rest of us, Steve.
Let's hope.
All right, Tony.
Yeah, you can find me at BuckeyeScoop.com. And, all kinds of stuff going on there. Actually started a couple weeks ago just doing a daily profile of every Ohio State football player, scholarship player, and going to run all the way to the start of camp. May include some walk-ons depending on how things work out, but giving me something to do there. And then, there's still all kinds of stuff going on, and stuff happens every day, as we fortunately and unfortunately have seen here of late.
All right, folks, here's the deal. This is a highlight of my week. I can sit and listen to these guys talk about Ohio State football endlessly. We get them for 1 hour. They donate more than that in terms of getting everything together. So they give of their time each and every week. And I would sit here and do this for free. But I've kind of committed myself to needing a little bit more than that, in addition to just the fine conversation that we have here. So if you know of a sponsor you can send our way, please hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Of course, the contributions that you bring individually as well. And for the first time, if you missed a number of notifications that I sent out on my channel, we're going to try out this show on the Ohio State channel for a number of reasons. One, there's a ton of clutter on my channel. We're clearing out the clutter. We do this live every Wednesday at 2:00 Eastern time, and within 24 hours, it's buried by about 6 videos. So we don't want that any longer. People are going to be able to find it at the Ohio State channel. We tried it out with a first ever Oklahoma live stream. And you would think with 1,000 subscribers on the Oklahoma channel and 26,000 on my main channel that it wouldn't do as well. Did better because people knew Oklahoma, Oklahoma, Oklahoma. That's where we can find everything Oklahoma. So that's what we're doing, clearing out the clutter. YouTube doesn't like clutter. They like clarity. So we are bringing a little bit more clarity to the channel. So yes, Ohio State Buckeyes live here every Wednesday live, 2 p.m. Eastern time with these three. And again, consider contributing because they give of their time and their expertise and knowledge. Kevin's got an article out. I love these kind of conversations. He's looking back at first game starts from Ohio State quarterbacks throughout history. Many come to mind for me. Kevin, do we tee this up in regards to the way you set up the article? We'll start with 2019.
Yeah, and I go all the way back to Troy Smith because at some point this was going to end up becoming a 10-part series, and I didn't want it to get there. But you go and you look at Justin Fields and his start against FAU. You know, he and Dwayne Haskins really are the guys that put up the big numbers based on where the offense is kind of set up. He was Fields 18 to 25 for 234 and 4 touchdowns. Also ran 12 times for 61 yards and a score. You know, at that point, I think everybody's like, oh, he's truly a dual threat quarterback. But for much of his career, he didn't have a lot of depth around him, or Ohio State definitely saw what happened when he was less than 100%, less than 80%. So he was not really a big runner from week to week. You go to Haskins, he was 22 of 30 for 313 and 5 scores with a pick. And even an atypical thing for Haskins, he rushed for 24 yards, which is probably what one of the national guys was looking at when he said that Dwayne Haskins was just more of a running quarterback than anything. But going through all of these quarterbacks, which, you know, has the ups and downs, guys like Cardale Jones, the Big Ten championship game, J.T. Barrett, Braxton Miller, Troy Smith, even Joe Bosserman, if I have to sit there and say that, all won their games. But, you know, there certainly were some games that were kind of stinkers in terms of numbers. And the worst one that I saw just in terms of number was Braxton Miller. And that was against Colorado in 2011, week 4, a 37-17 win, 5 of 13, threw for 83 yards, ran for 83 yards. But, you know, it was enough to win the game. He found Devin Smith twice on a 32-yarder and a 17-yarder. But all these games are wins, but, you know, not many of these games were going to be high-leverage situations like what it's going to be week 1 going to Minnesota for whoever Ohio State's 21 quarterback is. That's going to be very different than what most of these guys, minus Cardale Jones, had to face in, pretty much blowout type of situations.
I believe Terrell Pryor threw a record 4 touchdowns in his debut record against Troy in 2008. Is that correct? In his starting debut, rather.
Yes, he would throw for 139 yards, 10 to 16, 4 touchdowns and a pick. He would find Brian Hartline twice and Rory Nickel and Brian Robisky once for scores.
Oh,
sorry, folks in the graphics.
Rory Nickel touchdowns.
Sorry, folks on the graphics. I only got as far as Beckman. Got back to Todd Beckman. I only had a couple to go. I didn't even know. I didn't know how far you went back there, Kevin, as I went through your article. But I was pushed for time. We stopped at Todd Beckman there.
Well, I think it's an interesting comparison, and a lot of thought goes into it because you can't just a quarterback is a product of everyone around them. And it's hard to know, did Troy Smith have 8 returning starters on offense that year? Was there only one other guy or only one guy coming back from the previous year? So those things kind of factor into a lot of those decisions. And I just threw his name out there. I don't think he made his debut in a season opener because Justin Zwick would have been the starter in 2004. But there have been a lot of quarterbacks come and go, obviously, over the last 20 years at Ohio State, and varying degrees of success and varying degrees of ability in terms of throwing the football and running the football. And it's a fun thing to look at. What does it mean? Have any of them faced anything quite like what C.J. Stroud is going to face? And I would say Minnesota, probably a middle of the road defense. TCF Bank Stadium, I would say a middle of the road college football stadium, 50,000, and they'll be eager and excited if they're at full capacity to root for the Gophers, obviously. And, you don't get too wrapped up, I don't think, in crowd. I think, crowd can impact the game, to a degree, but I think it's the players on the field and the scheme and execution and those type of things that really come into play. And I think for a young guy, to play 60 or 70 plays at the quarterback position and make each of them a quality rep, that's going to be the challenge for him, is to not just get the play off and get the ball off to whoever it's supposed to go to, and hope that you did the right thing with it, because you're just caught in the moment type thing. So I think you're going to see a kid and a guy who's going to grow and develop over time. And obviously, I think by week 10, he's going to be much better than he was in week 1. And I think that that's what Ohio State fans have to hope for. What he always talked about, for you'll lose a game for every freshman that you have to play. And, that's one right there. One freshman's playing, and, which of these games are they going to lose? I don't know. It could come out of nowhere like Purdue did a few years ago. And so, you just kind of take it with a grain of salt and just go with it. But I'm interested to see those young guys grow and develop.
At the Minnesota game, 50,000 in the stands. How many of those are Minnesota fans? 27, 30? I mean, it's going to be a tough ticket, but
probably more there because it's so remote from Ohio. It's not a drivable game. I mean, on a Thursday night, you'd have to leave on Tuesday to get there. So you have to take a whole week off
fans
work
have been
to go to
waiting
the
for this
game
for a long time.
Yeah.
Ohio State fans have had these days off since like 2019.
Right. Plus, I think that all of your Chicago area guys are going to jump on that one. So I think that there will be a good number of Minnesota fans there, just for the fact that, keep hashtag stick to sports. Minnesota was buttoned up so tightly during all of this. I think that if they do open up that stadium to full capacity, and with it being a primetime weeknight game or whatever, I think it's going to be a pretty fun little ticket for people to go after. But if Ohio State fans are going to go all the way out and overrun Cal Berkeley for a game like that, coming out of a season where they really had no opportunity to go and see games, I could see Buckeyes fans from Guam trying to show up to go to this one. I mean, just for the sheer fact that even with all of that, it's probably still going to be easier to get tickets there than it's going to be at Ohio Stadium.
Do you think there's any possibility that Ryan Day takes the approach that I want to see two quarterbacks in this game? I'm going to play two quarterbacks. It was so close through August camp. I want to see two guys play and let them see, with the bullets firing at them, who's really going to emerge as the best against competition.
I don't think the road is the right place to do that. I think you do that at home. You don't want the starter looking over his shoulder. Now, if things are going well, that's another thing. But I think you stick with one guy until that guy can't do it, and then at home it would be a different story. Like the next week against, well, maybe not even Oregon. But after that,
I was going to say Troy, maybe against Troy or somebody, or whoever they got. Tulsa. I don't even know who the other sacrificial bye games are this year or whatever. Yeah, exactly. And hopefully we can talk about that in a minute. So excited. We can. I don't think you try and get too fancy. You play to win the game. You need to win the game, and we certainly saw Urban Meyer at some point pull the starters and then have to put them back in there because things went awry. And I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen here, but foot needs to meet neck. Pressure from foot needs to exert force on the neck. You need to finish them before you sit there and start farting around and getting fancy.
Sink the boat.
You can support the channel by shopping Amazon. Use the link in the description section. We're also on Patreon. All right. FanDuel released some point spreads that Tony made us aware of. Appreciate that. So the two that I found, Tony, was the big non-conference matchup against Oregon, and then the game at the end of the whole deal. I don't know if you saw any other Ohio State lines released.
Yeah, I think they released 4 of them. The one that Kevin is excited about is Ohio State is a 10-point road favorite at Michigan, which seems a little bit low. And then they are a 9-point favorite over Oregon, 11-point favorites at Indiana, and 11.5-point favorites at home against Penn State. I don't know if I'm comfortable touching either the Oregon or the Indiana games. I like that Penn State game. I think I love the 10 points of the Michigan game. That seems, I don't want to say free money, but it sure doesn't seem like it's going to cost too much.
Well, the last 2 times they played Michigan, they beat them by 25 and 29 points, I believe, if my math's correct. So, or
23.
29 and yeah, whatever it is. It was 63-38, wasn't it? And then
62-39.
62-39. Okay, that's 23 points, and then 56-27 was 29 points. So, it would seem, if all things are equal and things continue the way they are, that Ohio State will maintain its dominance even on the road against Michigan. But stranger things have happened, and of those 4, that's probably the one I like the best, because I think quality of the football at Penn State, Indiana, and Oregon is much better than it is at Michigan right now. And so, I guess we'll have to wait and see. They made the Ohio State-Oregon game a noon game on Fox, and it's kind of unclear. We all know a little bit about this television contract that Fox has the first pick, and they always seem to take the Ohio State-Michigan weekend as their first pick. And in this instance, it's unclear whether they get the second pick as well, or whether ABC and ESPN got the second pick, because, days after Fox announced Oregon and Ohio State were at noon, Fox and ESPN came out and said that Washington and Michigan are going to play at the same day at 7 p.m., which makes so much more sense with a team from the West Coast, and that game would be played at 4 o'clock Pacific time, whereas this Ohio State-Oregon game is going to be played at 9 a.m. Pacific time and 12 o'clock noon in Columbus, which, if it's Toledo or Akron or, Tulane or somebody like that, that's fine. But for a big game at noon, not feeling it. So I don't know. That's just my 2 cents on that. But I wonder if ABC actually had the first pick and took that other game. But even then, that doesn't make much sense either. So maybe Fox had the first pick that weekend as well.
Well, I think they're picking weeks, and it's not an AB. It's there are a lot of little nuances to the deal. Talking to somebody I know still in the industry of how it's set up, and honestly, I think that what would happen is Ohio State, Penn State would probably be the pick that ESPN, ABC would want to go after. So it's certainly going to, it's going to create a lot of ripples with how everything is set up. But Ohio State doesn't have Don Brown to kick around anymore. He's at Del Boca Vista, Arizona, or wherever the hell he is now. So, this is going to be the year, right? This is going to be the year. I mean, hell, they've already gone through. They already see Maurice Linguist show up and then leave. Who knows who might be coaching by that point or whatever. But as we talked about earlier in the show, that Aiden Hutchinson and Dax Hill are really about it. 10 points seems seriously low for me. I mean, Michigan did not play Ohio State last year. I'm sure that there were not holiday cards exchanged between the Harbaughs in the day, a stale fruitcake or a Christmas ham sent or anything there. I'm sure that Ryan Day would love nothing more than to vanquish Michigan. So I don't see any way that this game is going to be even close to in question. I mean, 10 points is maybe a first quarter line, okay, but for the entire game, I may have to sign up for this FanDuel Sports that you speak of, because I think that's just a printing press right there.
Well, and as I said on my podcast, I can't believe FanDuel thinks Michigan's going to score 90 points in this game.
Yeah, the secondary's not that bad.
No, exactly.
I-
But Cade McNamara, September Heisman.
Scored a lot of points against Rutgers. I know he did.
Not everybody can do that.
The thing I trust about this 10-point spread going Ohio State's way, also considering new quarterback, other positions need to be figured out, just like any other college football season. But of course, everybody's hyper-focused on the quarterback, and it's understandable. No experience there for the first time in forever. Basically no experience. But I very much trust Ryan Day and his staff's ability. You know, we're not talking about a week 1 matchup. We're talking about this is going to be whomever wins this quarterback job, unless he falters, gets replaced in game 4 or whatever. Basically, he's going to have 11 games under his belt. He's not going to be a rookie anymore. He's going to be, and most likely, you know, Tony at some point a few weeks ago kind of outlined, okay, this is what we can expect the Ohio State quarterback. Fill in your quarterback. I don't know what the name's going to be, but this is what his stat line most likely is going to look like. And so I very much trust this coaching staff and Ryan Day's ability to make this a much better team the last week of November than it was the first week of September. Then Jim Harbaugh and his staff is going to make that team. It might be worse in November than it was in September after they receive that coaching for a few months. So that's what I also trust in.
I'm with you on the earlier might be better for Michigan, which is why I was a little surprised that Michigan is a 2.5-point underdog at home to Washington in week 2. Week 1 and 2 is like when Michigan is at their absolute best. And so that might be one to jump on Michigan for getting that 2.5 points, because the week after, probably you might just want to start avoiding Michigan at that point.
Yeah, this is going to be 17 probably by the time we get to that week, is my opinion. But I guess we'll see. If you can get it at 10 now, take it.
Yeah, Kevin, you're coming in the private chat there with JTC. I assume I can spit these numbers out. I like your stat line for CJ Stroud there with 28 for 35, 315, 5 TDs. He's going to throw a pick maybe with about, a buck and change left. That doesn't matter.
A huck and chuck at the end of the half or something like that.
Yeah.
As
Mary.
Ryan Day is trying to sit there and prove a point, I could see that. But I don't see a situation of where whoever the quarterback is, and I believe it would be Stroud, is going to be throwing a lot of highly contested 50-50 balls, back shoulder, whatever. I've seen this show before, and it's generally Ohio State players running wide open. So that interception is just maybe my insurance just to not come across like that I'm being just completely scarlet colored glasses.
He throws the pick, but they still lead 28-10 at halftime, and let's go down to Holly Rowe. You know, she's got Ryan Day. Ryan, most everything went your way there. What do you see?
Reminds me of a conversation I had a few days ago from some viewer or caller who was pushing back on me in regards to predicting a lofty set of numbers like that for Bryce Young against Miami in the opener. Well, Bryce Young hasn't played. He hasn't proven anything. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Have you been watching Alabama football for the last 13 years? This guy's a 5-star. He's got talent all around him. He's facing Miami. He's being prepped as the starter throughout the entire offseason. Yeah, he's going to put up something like Kevin just noted, CJ Stroud against Michigan. Yeah, I have full confidence in that.
The groundwork, the history is there. It's a factory, and so the car that left the assembly line is going to look just like the car that's come right back up the assembly line now. It's all the same, and with that production and the receivers that keep coming, yeah, it's not hard to kind of make projections as Kevin did with CJ Stroud. If Kevin can do it.
And they've got 3 guys. I was waiting for a response there. I didn't get it. But
yeah, no.
Anybody can.
and the point that they've got 3 guys, that's why you recruit all the 5 stars and the high 4 stars. You got 3 guys, so it's not all on one guy. If one of them falters, the likelihood that all 3 falter and are no good this season is minuscule beyond belief.
That's a good way to put it. 2 guys that's highly recruited and highly ranked is Stroud and McCabe, and or McCord rather, and Miller, might have been up there as well. He had missed some time in high school, with his injuries or whatever. So, you've got 3 really good talents and plenty of depth at that critical position. It's just, learning those guys up and growing them up now and getting them ready to go play.
Yes.
Question? No, they haven't. No.
And yes, Ben, in the live chat, yes, if I catch some kind of comment that's directed in a mean way towards somebody personally, yes, you will be muted for a few minutes. Yeah, so that's exactly what happened to you. All right. Talking Buckeyes football here every Wednesday at 2 o'clock Eastern time. Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports. Steve, we appreciate you posting these on a regular basis. Kevin Noon, Buckeye Grove Rivals, and of course, Tony Gerdeman from Buckeye Scoop. Join them to their respective sites. Follow them on Twitter. They've got their own audio platform, so they're nice enough to supply us with our content for this show because they don't need to. They don't need to do this. So please understand that and appreciate it as well. Guys, we thank you so much for another show, and we will catch up with all of you next week, and we'll continue on through Steve's depth chart on the defensive side.
There you go. Take care, guys.